The envelope sits on the clerk's desk, and Joel has not looked at it once. That is the thing Lucy keeps returning to as Judge Marsh finishes her preliminary remarks, and the courtroom settles into the specific, carpeted quiet of a room where money is about to be divided. Joel is at his table in a suit that costs more than Lucy's first car. He is turned slightly toward his attorney, listening with the half-attention of a man who has already decided how this ends. His pen rolls between his fingers, the way it always did when he was confident. The way it did when he argued at dinner parties about markets he had never worked in, positions he had never held. She watches the envelope. Becca Holt, seated beside her, does not move. She had been 26 when she met him. She wants to be precise about this later, when she thinks about the version of herself who said yes to a second date at a restaurant on NW 23rd that cost more than her bi-weekly paycheck. The version who read the tasting menu and understood immediately that she was meant to be impressed and chose to let it work on her, just slightly, just enough. Joel Anderson was the kind of man who took up a room without seeming to try. He had his father's firm jaw and his mother's social ease and an Oxford comma of a personality, technically correct, slightly ostentatious, only noticeable when you were looking for it. He had been a litigator for 4 years. He spoke the way people speak when they have been listened to their whole lives. He told her she was remarkable on the 4th date. She had told him about Vernonia, the logging town, the 2-bedroom house, her mother's shift work at the mill, the partial scholarship. He had looked at her across his wine glass with an expression she had read as admiration and later revised to something more like appraisal. "You got yourself out," he said. She did not correct the framing. She should have. They married in September, 18 months after the first date. The wedding was at the Anderson family property in the West Hills, among the kind of Douglas firs that made you feel, temporarily, that you were standing inside something that had existed longer than your concerns. The prenuptial agreement was his attorney's work. Joel had presented it with a kind of performed discomfort. "It's just standard for our family situation. It protects both of us." And she had read it with the attention of someone who had studied financial instruments for 4 years and knew what protecting both of us looked like in contract language. What it looked like was his assets, his family assets, and any business enterprise either party independently developed during the marriage were each party's separate property. She had signed it. She had noted the clause about independent business enterprises. She had noted it carefully. The job at the regional firm became, in Joel's vocabulary, Lucy's little analyst position. Not at first. At first he was proud in a way that felt genuine, the kind of pride that requires an audience. He introduced her at dinners. He mentioned her degree. Somewhere in the 2nd year it shifted. She began to notice the shift the way you notice a slow leak, not in any single moment, but in the accumulation of air going somewhere it should not. He questioned her client analyses at dinner, lightly, in the tone of a man who was simply thinking out loud. He suggested she might be more fulfilled in something less demanding, something with better hours. "You seem tired, Luce." He accepted the social invitations without consulting her, then expressed mild surprise when the calendar was a problem. He had opinions about her clothing that he offered as observations. He knew all their friends better than she did, because they were, originally, his friends, and the maintenance of those friendships happened on his schedule. None of this was dramatic. That was the thing she kept turning over in her accounting of it. There were no scenes. There were no raised voices. There was simply a version of herself being slowly edited, not with malice, she believed, but with the casual confidence of a man who assumed the world arranged itself around his convenience because it always had. She told herself she was being ungenerous. She told herself she was adjusting to a different kind of life, and adjustment took time. She had been taught, in the wordless curriculum of her childhood, that endurance was a form of love, that you stayed, that you worked at things, that leaving was the option of people who had not tried hard enough. She was very good at trying hard enough. Rosa Jones ran a catering company out of a commissary kitchen on SC Division that smelled, at any hour, of roasted garlic and cardamom. She had been referred to Lucy by a woman at the gym who had mentioned offhandedly that Rosa was drowning in receipts and couldn't afford a proper accountant, and did Lucy know anyone? Lucy had known herself. The first meeting was in October, a Tuesday evening, Rosa sliding a shoebox of documentation across a folding table with the expression of someone surrendering a body. "Tell me how bad it is," Rosa said. It was not bad. It was disorganized, which was different. Lucy spent 3 evenings reconstructing the previous 18 months of Rosa's finances, identified 2 vendor relationships that were eating margin at rates Rosa hadn't quantified, and produced a 2-page summary with a corrective cash flow model. Rosa looked at it for a long time. "You did this in 3 evenings. I do this for a living. You're doing this for almost nothing." "You're my first private client," Lucy said. "Think of it as mutual." Rosa laughed, which was the sound Lucy would come to understand that Rosa made instead of crying when something moved her. She paid what she could. She told 2 friends, then 4, then, by the following spring, 8. The account was at a credit union in Northeast Portland, opened with a branch manager who did not know Joel, and who Lucy had driven 20 minutes out of her way to find. She deposited from her personal earnings, the private consulting she ran in the evenings, the weekends Joel spent at the club, the mornings she woke early enough to work an hour before he came downstairs. The account accrued with the patience of compound interest applied to a fixed and quiet determination. She did not lie about it. She simply did not mention it. Joel had never asked about her personal accounts with any specificity. He was not a man who looked at what he assumed was small. Patricia Hunt had exited a logistics startup at 41 and a climate fintech at 47. She had the bearing of someone who had been underestimated so consistently that she had converted it, over decades, into a kind of reserve energy. She met Lucy through a women's finance networking event that Lucy had attended on a Saturday while Joel was at a conference in Seattle. They had coffee twice. Then Patricia asked Lucy to look at a deal she was evaluating, a seed-stage fintech building automated cash flow tools for small businesses. The kind of software, Lucy noted, that would have cut her own early client work in half. "What do you think?" Patricia asked. "I think the unit economics work if they solve the churn problem in the first 6 months. I think the founding team has 1 person who can do that and 2 people who will slow her down." Patricia looked at her. "You want to co-invest?" Lucy did the math that evening. She had been doing her own version of the math for 2 years. She knew what her accounts held. She knew what a 2% stake in an early-stage fintech represented under plausible exit scenarios. She knew what a 2% stake represented if Patricia's pattern recognition was as reliable as her track record suggested. She said yes. 6 months later, Patricia introduced her to the broader investment circle. Then she said something that Lucy did not immediately know how to hold. "You have a better eye than anyone I've brought in at your stage. I don't know what you think you are, but I want you to revise it upward." Lucy drove home. Joel was at a firm event. She sat in the kitchen with a glass of water and considered what it felt like to be accurately appraised. It felt, she decided, unfamiliar in a way that was not comfortable. She stayed with the discomfort until it became something else. The business had a name, Anderson Financial Consulting, which she later amended, quietly, to AFC Consulting, and later still, after the divorce filing, to Clearwater Advisory Group. And it had clients and a LLC registration and a proper accounting structure, and a revenue line that, by the 3rd year, exceeded her salary at the regional firm by enough margin that she handed in her notice on a Tuesday with no more ceremony than she would have brought to any other Tuesday. Joel did not ask why she left the firm. He said, "Maybe this is good timing, actually. I've been thinking you could take on more of the household coordination." She said, "I have some consulting work I'm building out." He nodded in the way he nodded when he was listening to something he had already filed as unimportant. She found the emails in March. She was not looking. She had borrowed his laptop to print a document because hers was updating, and his email was open, and the thread was at the top, and the name Linda was in it, and the tone of the thread was not the tone of a professional exchange. She read 4 messages. She closed the laptop. She printed her document. She spent the following 2 weeks conducting an audit of the past 6 months with the same methodology she brought to client work: observable data, documented pattern, probable interpretation, confirmation threshold. She was not someone who acted on 4 data points. She needed more. She got more. She did not confront. She understood that confrontation was the option of people who had not yet finished preparing, and she was not finished preparing. She called Becca Holt, whose name she had received from Patricia 6 months earlier, held in the back of her phone, the way you hold the number of a contractor you hope not to need. Becca Holt had a corner office on SW Broadway, and a manner that suggested she had heard every version of this story and found none of them surprising and all of them workable. She listened to Lucy for 20 minutes. She asked 4 questions. She pulled up the prenuptial agreement, which Lucy had photographed and emailed before the meeting. She read the relevant clause. She looked up. "He wrote this to protect himself," Becca said. "I know. He did not anticipate that it also protects you." "I know." Becca was quiet for a moment in the way of someone arriving at the same destination from a different direction. "How long do we have before he files?" "I don't know. It may be soon." "Then we have work to do." He came home in the 3rd week of April. It was a Thursday. Lucy was at the kitchen table with her laptop, a client cash flow model open on one screen, the quarterly report from the fintech on the other. She had made dinner, which she acknowledged later was a choice she made from habit, the endurance curriculum, the staying. Joel stood in the kitchen doorway in his coat and looked at her with an expression she had not seen before and then recognized. He had rehearsed this. "I need to talk to you," he said. "All right. I think we've both known for a while that this isn't working." She waited. "I've spoken to David, his attorney, at his father's firm, and I think the cleanest thing is, you want a divorce." He looked slightly deflated at not being allowed to complete the architecture of the conversation. "Yes." "Okay," she said. He had prepared, she understood, for crying or anger or appeals. Her composure landed on him wrong. He recalibrated visibly. "I want this to be civil," he said. "I think the financial side is straightforward. I'll make sure you're comfortable." "That's kind. You don't have a lot of independent income right now, so we'll." "I appreciate that," she said. "I'll have my attorney contact David." He left the room. She closed her laptop. She sat for a moment in the kitchen she would not miss, under the pendant lights he had chosen without asking her, and she thought about Vernonia, the 2-bedroom house, the sound of the mill at night, her mother's work boots by the door. She thought about what she had been taught to endure and what she had built instead. Then she opened her laptop and sent an email. The settlement offer arrived in May. Joel's attorneys had produced a document of confident generality, a sum that reflected a thorough assessment of a woman who had left a mid-level analyst job 3 years ago and had been consulting part-time since, a characterization sourced, presumably, from Joel's understanding of her life. Lucy read it at Becca's office. Becca watched her read it. "He thinks this is generous," Becca said. "He does. Let's talk about what we file." The financial disclosure took 2 months to assemble. It was not complicated. Everything was documented, as Lucy had always documented everything: receipts and statements and capitalization records and investment schedules going back to the month she opened the Northeast Portland account. What it required was organization and certification, which were things she did professionally. She reviewed the final document at Becca's office on a Wednesday evening. Her disclosed net worth was in a column. She looked at it the way she looked at completed models, checking for errors, confirming the math. The math was correct. She signed. Joel has still not looked at the envelope. The judge asks both parties to confirm they have reviewed the financial disclosures. Joel's attorney confirms. Becca confirms. At this time, Judge Marsh says, "I'll review the disclosure summary." The envelope is opened by the clerk. Not with ceremony, just the practical tier of a task being performed. The judge reads. Her expression does not change, because judges are trained to have expressions that do not change, but something in the quality of her attention shifts. Joel's pen stops rolling. His attorney leans to say something to him. Joel leans away. A small movement, involuntary, the movement of a man who needs space to recalculate. The prenuptial agreement is read into the record. The clause regarding independently developed business enterprises is read into the record. The assessed value of Clearwater Advisory Group, 3 years of revenue, retained client relationships, and a client roster that had grown by word of mouth and competence, is read into the record. Lucy's co-investment stakes, including her position in the fintech, which had concluded a Series B at a valuation that was not the Series A valuation, are read into the record. She does not look at Joel directly. She looks at a point just past his shoulder, which is close enough to be precise without being something she has to hold. His attorney asks for a recess. Judge Marsh grants 15 minutes. In the hallway, Joel's attorney finds Becca. Lucy stands near the window at the end of the corridor. Outside, the Willamette is flat and gray under the October cloud cover, and a barge is moving downriver with the slow purpose of something that has weight and knows where it's going. She hears, without turning, Joel's voice at some distance. She does not turn. The settlement takes 3 more weeks to finalize. It is not contentious in the way Joel had presumably prepared for. She did not want the house, which had never been hers, or the investment accounts that predated the marriage, or his name, which she shed at the county clerk's office on a Tuesday with the quiet efficiency of completing a form. She kept her company. She kept her investments. She kept the small account at the Northeast Portland Credit Union, which held less than it once had, because she had deployed most of it, and the deployments had returned. Rosa sent flowers to the new office, a converted Victorian on any Alberta with tall windows and a second room she had begun to think about in terms of a hire. The card said, "About time. Dinner soon. I'll cook." Patricia sent a single text, "Told you." The office is quiet in the early mornings. Lucy is usually there before anyone else, which is a habit from the years of early rising, the hour before Joel came downstairs. She has kept the habit and shed its context, which is a good trade. She opens her laptop. The fintech's latest traction report is in her inbox. The catering company's new commissary project needs a financing structure. A referral has come in, a woman in her 30s, early in her own thing, recommended by Rosa, and Lucy has blocked an hour to meet her at 11. Outside, the November rain is doing what Portland rain does, which is fall consistently and without drama, as if it has made peace with being constant. She pours coffee from the machine she bought herself, not expensive, exactly right, and opens the first document of the day and begins.